Hello everybody, welcome back to Bela's channel. This is Bridget advocating for the orphans and telling my story. If you like what I'm about, like, share and subscribe. It helps with the growth of the channel. And with an E, season 1, episode 6, Remorse is the poison of life. In this episode, Anne is saving Minnie May Berry, Diana's young sister. We are also introduced to a new character, Auntie Josephine, Diana's aunt. The episode starts with Diana running through the snow in the dead of night to fetch Anne to help save her little sister, Minnie May. When Anne got there, she quickly diagnoses her with the croup and gets Mathews to fetch the doctor from Comedy. Anne does her best to save Minnie May, who was unable to breathe because of the flame caught in her throat. Josephine, Diana's aunt, visits the Berries in the episode. And while Anne was trying to save Minnie May, she didn't trust Anne, and she was kind of in her way. She felt like they should wait for the doctor to come, but Anne tells her that if they do that, Minnie May will die. When it started to look dire, Minnie May did cough up the phlegm, and the worst was over. When the doctor arrived, he credited and praised Anne's quick thinking for saving Minnie May's life. Auntie Josephine was impressed and also managed to turn Mrs. Berry's opinion of Anne around. Mrs. Berry then allows Anne and Diana to start hanging out again. Remember, in the last episode, they were banned from hanging out because they drank alcohol. Anne was overjoyed, and we then see the two girls walk to school arm in arm. In this episode, Gilbert's father John dies. When Anne and Diana were walking to school, Diana actually shares her concerns about Gilbert's father. She tells Anne that when Gilbert comes back to school, it most likely means that his father has died. Unfortunately, that ends up coming true. Before his death, though, we also see Gilbert standing by his father through it all. Him doing his schoolwork, sitting at his dad's bedside, and his father was very grateful and he made sure to tell Gilbert that. However, when he dies, Gilbert was not on his bedside. He was repairing a wagon, and his helper calls him in, and then we know that his father had died. We then see the funeral and then the reception at the Blythe homestead. During the gathering, Marilla notices a top hat on top of the cabinet and has a memory of her and John in their youth. From that flashback, we then learn that John and Marilla were an item at some point. Later that night, we see Marilla look over old love letters that John had sent her, and when Anne asked Marilla why she never married, she tells her that her family needed her after her old brother Michael died. Later on, Marilla and Gilbert had a nice moment at his father's gravesite, sharing memories of John. Back at the funeral reception, Gilbert approaches the door but can't bring himself to come in. Anne says that, goes to him to try to make him feel better by talking about her experience being an orphan, and she made a mistake by telling Gilbert that he was lucky he saw his parents. Unlike her, she never got to see hers. Gilbert thought Anne made this all about her and storms off. Anne wasn't happy, and she went to the clubhouse to let out her frustrations. Aunt Josephine hears her throwing tantrums on her walk. The two had a talk about relationships. Anne was inspired by Aunt Josephine, and she tells her that she was her role model. She also tells Marilla and Mathews that they were her role models as well. We also learn that Aunt Josephine never married, but lived with her best friend or kindred spirit for decades, and she had recently died. The show seemed to imply that she was in a same-sex relationship, one that made her very happy. Maybe Diana and Anne decided to make Gilbert a shepherd's pie. When they were going with the pie to Gilbert, Anne wanted to turn back, but Ruby grabs her hand and all three gave him the pie. Anne finally realizes the grief that Gilbert was experiencing. As Gilbert surveyed the pie, Anne all of a sudden burst out how she would not make a great wife and runs out. Everyone was confused and Gilbert thanks the girls for the pie. At the Avonlea General Store, Mathews meets Gilbert there and offers to help with the farm work, but at first Gilbert thought Mathews wanted to buy his land. Gilbert thanks Mathews for his kindness and he mentions how he never wanted to be a farmer. When Gilbert was on his way back home, Billy Andrews wanted to know if Gilbert was coming back to school because Anne was starting to show off. Gilbert defends Anne and told Billy that she was smart. That actually ended up in a first fight that Gilbert wins. Later we see Anne struggle with an apology letter to Gilbert and she runs to Aunt Josephine for advice. Aunt Josephine tells her that being a wife doesn't have to be one's life, but one can have a life via career. Anne seemed to have heard an idea from what Aunt Josephine had said, and she ran to the Blythe homestead, but finds that it had been picked up and Gilbert was nowhere to be found. And that is how episode 6 ended. Well, this was quite an interesting episode. We were introduced to Aunt Josephine, who was into same-sex relationships, and again we saw Anne facing another challenge. And I love that Anne had to tell Gilbert that he was lucky, because that actually happens in real life. People don't actually realize that the person just experienced loss and they are grieving. There is no lucky there. And some people actually say, well, you never got to live with your parents, so you never know like the life with them, you never experienced, so it shouldn't be that painful. But trust me, it's the same. It's the same. Everyone wishes to have a parent alive. And I feel like N with an A is all about social issues and social injustice. If you like pay attention, you actually realize that it's all about social injustice and social issues, and also showing us how certain things were achieved. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. This is Bella. Why not change your narrative? Why not change your narrative? How do we leave a legacy of hope for those whose dreams are often forgotten? If you like this video, please subscribe, share and like. Also leave your comments. I would love to read your comments. Bye!